Have you ever looked at the moon during an eclipse and wondered, why does it turn red? There is a folk tale from Bangladesh that tells a beautiful yet mysterious story. It says, the moon bleeds every month. But why? Because long ago, the moon made a great sacrifice to save the world from eternal darkness. This story is one of the few folk tales that talks about menstruation in a deep and meaningful way. In many cultures, this is a topic people don't discuss openly. But this tale connects it to something magical, something cosmic. So, sit back and listen as we take you through the legend of the moon's menstruation. Let's begin. A long time ago, before the world had light, there was only darkness. The sky was empty, and people lived in fear. They could not see the land, the rivers, or even their own faces. The world was cold and silent. Nothing grew. No one smiled. The gods saw the suffering of the people, but they could not help. The sun was too proud to share its fire, and the stars were too weak to shine. But the moon was different. It was kind and gentle. It watched over the people and felt their pain. One day the moon decided, I will bring light to the world, even if it costs me everything. And so, the moon made a great sacrifice. The moon saw the suffering of the people and could not stay silent. It wanted to help, but it was only a soft glow in the sky, weak and powerless. The moon did not have the strength of the sun or the fire of the stars. But it had something else, a heart full of kindness. So, the moon went to the gods and begged them for a way to bring light to the world. The gods listened, but they were afraid. They knew that to create light, something great had to be lost. No light could come without sacrifice. The moon understood this. It was ready to give up its own power to bring light to the people. The gods warned the moon that it would have to bleed, that it would feel pain, and that it would never be the same again. But the moon did not turn away. It agreed. And so, the gods gave the moon a choice. It could remain as it was, cold and distant, watching over the world in darkness. Or it could give its own light, shedding part of itself, and in return the people would no longer live in fear. The moon did not hesitate. It chose to sacrifice itself. With a deep breath, the moon let go of its own energy. The light spread across the sky like a wave, touching every corner of the world. The people looked up in wonder as, for the first time, they saw the land around them. They saw the rivers, the trees, and each other's faces. They could walk without fear. They could build their homes. They could see the beauty of the world. But this great act of kindness came with a cost. The moon had given away a part of itself, and it could not stay whole. Every month, it would lose its strength. It would bleed, turning red in the sky as a sign of its sacrifice. And then, slowly, it would heal, returning to its full shape, only to repeat the cycle again. The people saw this and understood. They honored the moon for its gift, knowing that every time it bled, it was for them. It was not a sign of weakness, but a sign of love and strength. The moon's pain had brought life to the world. As time passed, the people grew used to the moon's light. They no longer feared the darkness as they once had. They could now gather around fires, tell stories, and travel across the land. Crops grew under the moon's watchful eye, and rivers shone under its silver glow. The world had changed, all because of the moon's sacrifice. But the gods knew that balance had to be maintained. The moon had given away its energy, and now it had to follow the cycle of giving and healing. Every month, when the moon grew weak, it would bleed, turning red in the sky. The people looked up and saw this change. Some were afraid, thinking the moon was angry. Others believed it was a warning. But the wise elders understood. They gathered the people and told them the truth. The moon was not angry, and it was not punishing them. Instead, it was going through a natural cycle, just as everything in the world must. The rivers flowed, the seasons changed, and the moon, too, had to follow its path. The elders explained that just as the moon bled to bring light, so too did women bleed to bring life. It was not something to fear or hide from. It was a part of nature, a part of creation. The moon's menstruation was a reminder that life itself was built on cycles of pain, healing, and renewal. But not everyone accepted this wisdom. As generations passed, some people forgot the true meaning of the moon's sacrifice. They began to see menstruation as something unclean, something shameful. They whispered behind closed doors, telling girls and women to stay hidden when they bled. They forgot that the same cycle that gave them life was the cycle that had once saved the world from darkness. The moon continued its journey across the sky, watching over the people. It did not speak, but its message remained. Every month it bled. Every month it healed. It did not hide, and it did not feel shame. It remained in the sky for all to see, a quiet teacher, reminding those who would listen of the sacrifice it had made and the truth it carried. And so, those who understood the story passed it down through the generations. They taught their children to look up at the sky and remember. They told them that menstruation was not a curse, but a gift. It was the cycle of life, just as the moon had shown them long ago. Some people listened, while others turned away. But the moon did not stop. It continued its cycle, waiting for the day when all would remember its story once again. As the years passed, the moon remained in the sky, carrying its silent message. The world below it kept changing. New rulers rose and fell, kingdoms were built and destroyed, and people's beliefs shifted like the winds. Some still remembered the truth about the moon's sacrifice, but many had turned away from the old wisdom. They no longer saw the moon's bleeding as an act of strength. Instead, they feared it, just as they had once feared the darkness before the moon gave them light. Some cultures began to see the lunar eclipse as a bad omen. They believed that when the moon turned red, something terrible was about to happen. They thought that the moon was cursed or that it was being swallowed by a great beast in the sky. To them, the blood-red color was a warning. They gathered in groups, shouting prayers, banging drums, or throwing stones at the sky, hoping to chase away the evil that they imagined was attacking the moon. But the moon was not cursed. It was simply following the cycle that had been set long ago. The bleeding was not a sign of weakness, nor was it a punishment. It was the cost of giving light to the world. It was the same cycle that women carried within them, the cycle that made life itself possible. Yet, instead of respecting this connection, many societies turned away from it. They began treating menstruation as something shameful, something to be hidden. Women were told they were impure when they bled. They were kept away from sacred places, from celebrations, and sometimes even from their own families. They were made to believe that their natural cycle was a burden rather than a gift. This way of thinking spread across different lands, passed down through generations. Some women were forced to stay in separate rooms or small huts during their bleeding days. Others were told not to touch food, plants, or even water, because people feared they would bring bad luck. In some places, girls were not even told about menstruation until they experienced it themselves, leaving them scared and confused. But there were still those who remembered the old wisdom. They looked at the moon and saw the truth that many had forgotten. They knew that menstruation was not something to be ashamed of. It was the very process that allowed life to continue. Without it, no child could be born. Without it, humanity itself would not exist. Some of these wise people tried to teach others. They told stories of the moon's sacrifice, reminding people of its kindness and strength. They explained that the moon's bleeding was not a sign of danger, but a reminder of the balance of life. Just as the moon gave its light so that people could see, women's bodies followed their natural cycle so that life could continue. But changing beliefs was not easy. The idea that menstruation was something bad had become deeply rooted in many cultures. Even when people heard the truth, they struggled to accept it. They had lived for so long under the weight of false beliefs that the truth seemed strange to them. And so, the world remained divided. Some people feared the moon's bleeding, while others honored it. Some treated menstruation with shame, while others understood its power. The moon continued to shine, waiting for the day when all would remember its story, not as something to fear, but as a tale of sacrifice, strength, and life itself. Even as the world changed and people forgot the true meaning of the moon's bleeding, the sky remained the same. The moon followed its cycle, giving light and then fading, bleeding and then healing. It never stopped, never hesitated, never questioned its purpose. It had given itself to the world, and it would continue to do so whether people understood or not. But there were still those who carried the old wisdom. In small villages, in quiet corners of the world, mothers whispered the story of the moon to their daughters. They told them that their bodies were not something to be ashamed of. They reminded them that just like the moon, they carried the power of life within them. These mothers knew that even if the world tried to make women feel small, their bodies were doing something powerful. Yet, the struggle continued. In many places, girls were still treated differently when they began their first bleeding. Instead of being celebrated, they were often made to feel dirty. Some were forced to stay away from others, some were forbidden from going to school, and some were even told that their pain did not matter. They were expected to hide what was natural, to pretend that it did not exist. But no matter how much society tried to silence the truth, nature could not be denied. Just as the moon continued its cycle, so did women's bodies. Every month, whether hidden or honored, the cycle continued. And with each new generation, there were those who looked up at the sky and began to question what they had been taught. Somewhere, a girl would see the red moon in the sky and ask why it bled. Somewhere, a mother would tell her the truth. Somewhere, a woman would remember that she was not weak, but part of a cycle as old as the world itself. And slowly, those who listened began to change. Some people began to speak up, refusing to believe that menstruation was something to be feared. They challenged the old beliefs that treated women as unclean. They reminded others that without menstruation, no life could begin. They taught their daughters to be proud of their bodies instead of ashamed. The change was not sudden. It did not happen overnight. But like the slow return of the moon's light after an eclipse, the truth began to shine again. Schools started teaching girls about their own bodies, breaking the silence that had lasted for so long. Doctors and scientists spoke about menstruation openly, proving that it was natural, not a disease or a curse. Organizations worked to provide menstrual products to those who had none, helping women and girls live without fear or shame. Yet, even with these changes, the old beliefs did not disappear completely. In many places, women still faced restrictions during their bleeding days. They were still made to feel embarrassed, still told that they could not talk about what they were going through. The shadows of the past were not so easily erased. But the moon had taught an important lesson. No matter how many times it faded, it would always return. No matter how much darkness tried to cover it, the light would always come back. The truth, like the moon, could not be hidden forever. It would rise again, stronger than before, waiting for the world to finally understand. The moon had been bleeding for centuries, watching over the earth as the people below it changed. It had given its light so that humanity would never again be lost in the darkness. It had accepted its fate, knowing that to give it must also lose. It did not complain. It did not ask for anything in return. It simply continued its cycle month after month, year after year, waiting for the world to understand. But humans often forget what they once knew. They turn away from the truth when it becomes uncomfortable. And so, many of them stopped looking at the moon with wonder. They no longer saw it as a protector, as a giver of life. Instead, they saw only what they feared. They saw the blood-red moon and whispered of curses. They saw menstruation and whispered of impurity. They did not understand that both were part of the same sacred cycle. Yet, even as people tried to hide the truth, the moon remained in the sky. It continued to bleed and heal, never ashamed of what it was. And slowly, generation after generation, some began to look up once more. They began to question the old beliefs. They asked why something so natural was treated with shame. They asked why women, who carried the power of life within them, were told to feel unclean. These voices grew louder. In some places, traditions began to change. More people started talking openly about menstruation. Schools taught both girls and boys that it was nothing to be afraid of. Mothers and fathers no longer hid the truth from their daughters. Women who had once been silent about their struggles now spoke with confidence, demanding that they no longer be treated as less. Still, not everyone was ready to listen. Some clung to the old ways, refusing to believe that their ancestors could have been wrong. They insisted that menstruation was a weakness, a burden, something to be kept secret. But the moon had seen this happen before. It had seen people resist the truth, just as it had seen them forget it. And it knew that, in time, those who remembered would grow stronger. Because truth cannot stay buried forever. It rises, like the moon after a new phase, like the light returning after the darkest night. The moon had given itself so that people would not live in fear of the dark. And now, slowly, those who listened to its story were helping others break free from the fear and shame that had been passed down for generations. One day, there may come a time when no girl is ever made to feel ashamed of her body, when no woman is treated as unclean because of something natural, when no one looks at the blood-red moon and trembles with fear, but instead sees it for what it truly is, a sign of sacrifice, of strength, of the eternal cycle of life. And until that day comes, the moon will continue to bleed, not as a warning, not as a curse, but as a reminder that there is power in pain, a reminder that healing follows loss, a reminder that the truth, no matter how long it takes, will always return to the light. That's the end of the story. If you enjoyed the story, please like, share, and subscribe for more exciting tales. Check out our other videos and share your thoughts in the comments. Stay tuned for the next adventure. Thanks for watching.